What's that you say? Ted's finally making that Fizban's Treasury of Dragons new monster video that he said he was going to make when the book came out last year? Yes. Yes, I am. Because I made a commitment that I would make this video, and I am planning to go back and make all the videos that I said I was going to make, and that my just weird tornado of just burnout, sickness, surgeries, etc. that this year has slowed me down for the first half of this year. We are back. It may be October and almost a full year after the video and the book has released, but we're doing it. So, if you want to see me not only covering everything new, watching me slog through opening that really, really awful advent calendar, as well as covering playtest live plays and going back and hitting all the backlog of everything I haven't done in the past, subscribe to this channel. Look at this. We are approaching 98.9. We're almost at the 100K, and I would really love to hit that, and you guys could really help me do it. So, without further ado, Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, the bestiary. By the way, the reviews on my poll of whether it's pronounced bestiary or bestiary was very mixed, so I still don't know. A lot of people say because it's spelled bestiary, that's how you should say it. Other people say it's something that contains beasts, so it should be bestiary. Either way, first up on the list is the Amethyst Dragons. So, honestly, there wasn't that much as far as new dragons are concerned in this book, but we'll go ahead and take a look. So, again, if we were to go to Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, we do have, again, here is the bestiary that you can see here. I say bestiary, so that's what you're going to hear. But either way, so we'll start off with Amethyst Dragons. This is obviously all of the gem dragons are new for 5th edition. Excuse me. So we're going to cover those. So if we scroll down, Amethyst Dragons, obviously, I'm trying to get to a picture of some art. Here we can see, maybe. There we go. They're actually one of the cooler looking ones, and honestly, I kind of forgot what they look like. I've seen Emerald and Sapphire a bunch, as well as Crystal, but I actually think I might like the design of the Amethyst Dragon the best out of all of them. So let's go ahead and we'll just go with the ancient version and take a look at what we got here, right? So, a lot of hit points. It's got a swim speed as well as a fly speed. Resistance to force and psychic damage. No flat-out immunity to damage type, interestingly enough. Frightened and prone condition immunity. Blind sight as well. Can breathe water and air. Legendary resistance. And then again, for the dragon stuff, this is all going to be kind of standard. The only thing that kind of separates the gem dragons from the other dragons is the presence of the spellcasting that they have. So we've got a bite attack, does some piercing damage plus force, a claw attack, again, also slashing. Now, its breath, it's a singularity breath. So it's a 90-foot cone, and each creature in that area, I think it is a gravitational force, right? So each creature in that cone must make a strength saving throw, or takes 14d8 force damage, and their speed becomes 0 until the start of the dragon's next turn. On a success, they take half damage, and their speed isn't reduced. We can see here they do have spell casting. Again, psionically based, but blink, control water, dispel magic, freedom of movement, globe of invulnerability, plane shift, protection from evil and good and sending. They can change shape, similar to what metallic dragons can do. They can also do the psychic step here, so they can teleport 60 feet as a bonus action. And then again, the legendary actions, claw for 1, psionic spells or psionic step for 2, an explosive crystal for 3. It spits out an amethyst at a point within 60 feet, and then it blows up as like a mini bomb, 20-foot radius sphere, dex saving throw, or take 48 force damage and be knocked prone. Next up, we have Animated Breath. This is similar to what we saw in, I think it was in the Eberron books, where they had animated spells, but instead of a spell being cast and turned into something animate, like a fireball or a lightning bolt, this is, it says a Chromatic Dragon's Breath Weapon is the manifestation of the energy that suffuses the dragon. With sufficient practice, dragons can learn to draw on the magic from the elemental planes to shape their breath weapons into bipedal form, creating element creatures called animated breaths. So, these pose a very interesting thing that you could, in theory, add to any dragon if you so choose. And I think it does it say specifically? It says chromatics specifically. So this would be a cool way to just change up the fight for a traditional chromatic dragon fight. As you can see here, here's a white dragon animating its breath into this elemental. Challenge rating 6. Again, it's an elemental. It says it has resistance to the type of damage that it's created from. So this instance in the image here would be cold. A lot of immunities we see on elementals: exhaustion, paralysis, petrified, poison, restrained, and unconscious. It says chromatic form. When created, it takes one of the 5 forms. It determines what happens. So it says up top here, it says AC and other things. It normally has 15 AC, except if it's cold, it has 17. It has an aura if it's made out of fire, where creatures that within 5 feet of it take damage. If they're within 5 feet at the start of the animated breath turn, and if they touch it or hit it with an attack. It says a melee attack, so even if you're at reach, I guess that still works. They take a d6 fire damage. Putrid aura looks to be similar for acid and poison forms, but they make a constitution saving throw or be poisoned until the start of their next turn if they're within a certain range of it. And then again, they take a d6 acid damage if they touch it. It can make 2 slam attacks, which do bludgeoning damage plus 2d10 of the associated element. And then they can also, or the lightning version only can do lightning burst as a bonus action. It teleports to an unoccupied space within 30 feet, and then each creature after where it teleports within 5 feet of it takes a d6 lightning damage. Next up, we have the 2 big ones here, the Aspect of Bahamut and the Aspect of Tiamat. These are essentially avatars for the 2 dragon gods here on the material plane. So again, it's not the dragon itself. It's interesting because we do have a Tiamat stat block from Rise of Tiamat, which is a little bit different than the Aspect here. But this is a challenge rating 30 creature, which again, I feel like that does mean that the Tiamat we saw in Rise of Tiamat would be even higher, because these are both challenge rating 30, as was that one which was supposed to be actual Tiamat. Again, immunity to acid, cold, fire, lightning, radiant, bludgeoning, piercing, slashing from non-magic. Immune to charm, deafen, frightened, paralyzed, and stunned. Has true sight. Platinum Brilliance recharges on a short or long rest. If it would be reduced to 0 hit points, it instead is reset to 500 hit points. Recharges its breath weapon and regains any expended uses of legendary resistance. This is a mythic action, and as such, the experience points increase. Associated with that, 5 legendary resistances. We have Bite, Claw, and Tail attack with multi-attack. The Bite does piercing and force damage. The Claws do slashing, but also have a grapple and restrain. And the Tail does bludgeoning, but also has a potential to knock someone prone. For breath weapon, we have Exalting Breath. So exhales the restoring winds of Mount Celestia in a 300-foot cone. Each creature in that area gets 13 d10 hit points, and any creature in the area's aspect that has been dead for no longer than 1 hour is restored to life with full hit points. Or Platinum Breath, which is fire. We do dexterity saving throw or 12d10, sorry, not fire, radiant damage in a 300-foot cone. We have Change Shape. We have Legendary Actions, which we have 3. 1 for attack, 2 for Furious Bite, which is, it makes a bite attack if the target hits a creature. It must make a Wisdom saving throw or be frightened. And then we also have the Mythic Actions, right? So for 2 actions, we can do Celestial Shield. Manifests 7 ancient spectral gold dragons around himself. He gains 77 temporary hit points. Or Celestial Lances for 3. The aspect conjures 4 enormous lances of magical force that plummet to the ground in 4 different points within 150 feet and then disappear. Each creature in a 20-foot radius, 100-foot high cylinder centered on each point must make a dex save or take 7d6 force damage. A creature in that area of more than 1 lance can only be affected by 1. Similar to the aspect of Bahamut, we also have an aspect of Tiamat. Again, looks to be, I think, the same immunities as far as damage and conditions go. We have Chromatic Wrath instead of Platinum Brilliance. If the aspect would be destroyed, the same kind of thing. Goes down to 0 to hit points, it jumps up to 500. Gets its breath, recharges Chromatic Flames, rather, and then gets back expended legendary resistances, of which, again, it has 5. Bite attack, claw attack, tail attack, they look to basically be the same. Although rather than the different breath weapons, it says something called Chromatic Flames. It exhales multicolored flames in a 300-foot cone. Dexterity saving throw, or the creature takes 11d12 damage of an aspect of its choosing. Acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison. On a success, it takes half as much damage. Legendary resistance, we have attack. We have 3. Legendary actions, we have 3. 1 for attack, 2 for furious bite, so those appear to be the same. But our mythic actions, we have Hurl Through Avernus for 2 actions. The creature that you target must make a DC 25 Charisma saving throw or take 8d10 psychic damage and be banished to Avernus. At the start of the aspect's next turn, it reappears in an unoccupied space within 10 feet. Or Chromatic Flare for 3 actions. Each creature of the aspect's choice in a 60-foot radius sphere centered on her must make a DC 27 Dexterity saving throw or take 6d12 damage of a type chosen by the aspect, acid, cold, fire, or lightning, half on a success. Next up, we have the Chromatic Great Worm. Now, it's been a little while, so if you forgot what a Great Worm is, it is essentially when a dragon gets so powerful that it starts to reach out to the presence of its other selves on other planes and in other multiverses and starts to basically combine strength, right? So it says often a Great Worm's ascension involves fusing the power of a single dragon's echoes across different worlds of material planes. The Black Great Worm Chronepsis, for example, is said to have stalked multiple worlds and devoured many of his echoes before withdrawing to a planar lair in the Outlands. The Great Worm Marshardalon worked with a Balor to ritually drain the power of his echoes, then infuse their power into himself by implanting the Balor where his heart had been. So on. So these things are pretty insane. Now, they are only a challenge rating 27, so technically, in theory, challenge rating power is slightly weaker than the aspect of Tiamat or Bahamut, but I do feel like they're pretty, they rival them, I would say. All right, so we have immunity to our associated damage type, as well as Charmed, Frightened, and Poisoned. Chromatic Awakening. This is, again, another mythic ability here, right? If it drops to 0, it gets 425 hit points, its breath weapon, and expended legendary resistance is back. 4 legendary resistance. It doesn't need to eat or drink. We have multi-attack for a Bite and Claw. Again, similar to what we saw, Bite, Claw, and a Tail attack. Then we have the Breath Weapon. 300-foot cone dexterity saving throw, where the creature takes 12d12 damage of whatever the associated type is. Legendary actions, we have 3. 1 for an attack, 2 for a wing attack, similar to the other dragons that we've seen, where basically it beats its wings, people take bludgeoning damage, and it also lets it move up to half its speed. Or 3 for an Arcane Spear. It creates 4 magical spears. Each creature that it hits, each spear hits a creature I can see within 120 feet of it. Oh, it just auto hits, dealing a d8 plus 8 force damage, and then disappears. Mythic Actions adds the Bite attack, and then Chromatic Flare for 2 actions. A lesser version of the aspect of Tiamat, but a DC 26 saving throw in a 60-foot radius sphere centered on a point it chooses. Centered on the Great Worm itself, rather, and it does 5d8 of the associated element. And then next up here, we have Crystal Dragons, which like I said, if we take a look at the art for Crystal Dragons, they're I feel like they're a lot chunkier than the other dragons we've seen, but I still feel like the Amethyst Dragon, rather, is winning in my mind. So, here we have our Crystal Dragon. This one also happens to have a climb speed, I noticed. Resistance to cold and radiant damage. 3 legendary resistances. Bite, claw attacks. And we have Scintillating Breath. A burst of brilliant radiance and a 90-foot cone. DC 22 con save or take 11d8 radiant damage. The dragon also gets 25 temporary hit points. And then it has some psionics here. Dancing Lights, Guidance, and then Command, Divination, Greater Restoration, Hypnotic Pattern, and Invisibility. Change Shape and Psychic Step that they all have, and then 3 legendary actions. Claw Psionics remains the same, but then we have Starlight Strike for 3. It releases a searing beam of starlight at a creature that it can see within 60 feet. The target must succeed on a DC 19 Dex save or take 11d6 radiant damage. I like the Crystal Dragons a lot, like lore-wise, and just kind of the design a little bit, and I do have some partial bias because in a campaign we played heavily tied to dragons, my character's partner in the game was a Crystal Dragon. But I still think I like the design of the Amethyst Dragon currently a little bit more. So if we were to go next up after the Crystal Dragons, we have Deep Dragons, which I really, really like the art that they changed. They very much gave them this vibe of something that lives in the Underdark, right? These sort of whited out, blinded eyes of a creature that might live subterraneanly. I really like the mushroom growths coming out of the neck. I really like the design a lot more personally. The other Deep Dragons were very kind of like sleek and almost serpentine, and I really like the design of this one. So let's take a look. Resistance to poison and psychic damage, immunity to charm, fright, and poisoned. 3 legendary resistances. Multi-attack for a bite, claw, tail attack. Also has change shape. And then Nightmare Breath. A cloud of spores and a 90-foot cone. Creatures must make a wisdom saving throw or take 9d10 psychic damage and be frightened of the dragon for a minute. They can repeat those saving throws at the end of their turn. Then we have 3 legendary actions. Tail attack for 1. We have Commanding Spores for 1. It releases spores around a creature within 30 feet rather. I'm sorry. Must make a DC 19 Wisdom saving throw or use its reaction to make a melee attack against a random creature within reach. If no creatures are within reach, the target can't take a reaction and it takes some psychic damage. Or Spore Salvo for 2 actions. Again, spores are released in a 30-foot radius. Around a specific creature within 30 feet. My mistake. Then a DC 19 con save or take 8d6 poison damage and become poisoned for a minute. That saving throw can be repeated at the end of the creature's turn. So, I like the design a lot, but the dragon, I feel like it almost just, I don't know. The Nightmare Breath is an interesting choice. But like a lot of this is very reminiscent of what we expect from Myconids. But also, if we're just going to be doing like poison damage, just use a green dragon, in my opinion. So like it's really cool to see. I like the lore and things, but ultimately, I do feel like the Deep Dragon falls a little bit short. Next up is the Draco Hydra, which pretty much the name explains all you need to know. It's a Hydra, but instead of typical Hydra heads, its heads are comprised of Chromatic Dragons. So we have, again, multiple heads, which gives us advantage on saving throws against blinded, charmed, deafened, frightened, stunned, and unconscious. Whenever it takes 30 more damage in a single turn, a head dies. If all its head dies, it dies. At the end of its turn, it grows 2 heads for each one, again, and gets 10 hit points like you'd expect from a Hydra. It has an extra reaction for each head beyond the first. So it has more reactions than your typical creature would have. If it's asleep, at least one of the heads is awake, so you're not going to catch it napping. It makes as many bite attacks as it has heads. And it does a d10 plus 5 damage of an elemental type, acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison. And then it has a prismatic breath and a 60-foot cone for 6d10 damage chosen by the Draco Hydra, again, from the list of elemental types. Pretty cool. It's just a nice little upgrade. It kind of gives a little ranged action as well as a fly speed to a Hydra. All right, we have the Draconians here. Again, these guys were originally from the world of Krynn or Dragonlance. So these creatures, we have a handful of these. We have 5. So first off, we have the Draconian Dreadnought here, which you can see is sort of a melee kind of brawler here. It has death throws. When it's reduced to 0 hit points, it bursts into flames. Creatures within 10 feet of it must make a dex save or take 3d6 fire damage. It has 2 of these serrated swords, which deal 2d8 plus 4 slashing. Looks like that just may be like a traditional long sword, but adding an extra d8 to it. It has a tail attack as well, that if the creature is large or smaller, it can attempt to knock them prone, and has shape theft as a reaction. After it kills a medium or smaller creature, it can magically transform itself to look and feel like that creature while retaining its game stats, the ones that we have here, other than its size. The transformation lasts until the Draconian dies or uses an action to end it. That's crazy. This could have all sorts of wild implications for how you want to go about things in your campaign. Then we have the Draconian Foot Soldier. That one, by the way, was a challenge rating 4. This guy is a challenge rating 1/2, so more of a standard one. If you wanted to throw something at your party that's a little bit above, a little bit different, but perhaps not a true Dragonborn. So, controlled fall. When it falls and isn't incapacitated, it subtracts up to 100 feet from the fall damage it would take. It also has death throws. However, when it dies, it turns to stone and releases a petrifying gas. Each creature within 5 feet of it must make a con save or be restrained as it begins to turn to stone. The restrained creature must repeat the saving throw at the end of its next turn. On a success, it ends. Otherwise, the creature is petrified for 1 minute. After a minute, the body of the Draconian crumbles to dust. So it looks like you're only petrified for a minute. So that's not too bad. So it crumbling to dust after a minute doesn't seem to affect you at all. So it's just a minor inconvenience in that way. Then it can make 2 short sword attacks, which just do standard damage. Then we have the Infiltrator, seemingly, I was going to say more of the rogue type, but it looks very top heavy. Like if you hit it in the legs, the whole thing would just fall over. Challenge rating 3, immune to poison in the poison condition. This one also, they all have death throws, so we'll see what the difference is between them. This one turns into a puddle of acid and splashes on the ground. Creatures within 5 feet must make a dex save or be covered in acid for a minute. They can use their action to scrape or wash off the acid. Otherwise, they take 2d6 acid damage at the start of each of their turns. It can also glide while it isn't incapacitated, subtracting 100 feet from the fall, and then moving 2 feet horizontally for every 1 foot it descends. It has multi-attack, where it makes 2 dagger attacks. If it hits the same creature, that creature, with both of them, they must make a Constitution saving throw or become poisoned until the end of the target's next turn. While poisoned in that way, it is also paralyzed, and the attacks themselves do poison damage as well. We have the Draconian Mage, which has its death throws are its scales and flesh immediately shrivel away and its bones explode. Each creature within 10 feet of it must make a dexterity saving throw or take 2d8 force damage. It also has glide. It can make 2 trident or necrotic ray attacks. The trident is pretty standard. The necrotic ray does 3d6 necrotic damage on a range of 60 feet. And then its spellcasting is once a day, enlarge, reduce invisibility, and stinking cloud. And lastly, we have the Draconian Mastermind here, which has immunity to charm. Its death throws are that its magical essence lashes out as ball lightning at the closest target within 30 feet before arcing out to up to 2 other creatures within 15 feet of the first. Each creature must make a dex save. On a failed save, they take 2d8 lightning damage and are stunned until the end of its next turn. On a successful save, they take half damage and aren't stunned. It has rend, 3 rend attacks or 1 energy ray. The rend just does a d6 plus 2. The energy ray does a d10 plus 3. As Noxious Breath is the first one with a breath weapon. So each 15-foot cone, each creature in that area must make a DC 14 con save or take 66 poison damage and gain a level of exhaustion. On a successful save, it takes half damage and doesn't gain exhaustion and is immune to all of its Noxious Breath attacks for 24 hours. It also has spellcasting, at-will invisibility, and mage hand, as well as twice per day dimension door, disguise self, and sending. And then it also has magic shield 3 times per day, which looks to function identically to the shield spell. However, it is not the shield spell, therefore cannot be counterspelled. Next up, we have the Draconic Shard. It says, Gem Dragons wield psionic power, and when a powerful Gem Dragon perishes, the force of the dragon's will and mind sometimes refuses to pass on. The essence lingers in the form of a psychic remnant called a Draconic Shard. This is a challenge rating 17 shard, which is considered an undead. Has resistance to acid, fire, bludgeoning, piercing, slashing from non-magic, and then immunity to cold, necrotic, poison, and psychic damage, as well as a variety of conditions. Here we can see one here, what basically looks like an amethyst dragon almost. All right, Incorporeal Movement. Oh, it adds an intelligence modifier to its AC. It can move through things because it can go incorporeal. 3 legendary resistances. If it drops to 0 hit points, the shard disappears and leaves a tiny cracked gemstone. It matches the gem whoever the dragon was. Unless it's destroyed, after 120 days, the gemstone dissipates and the shard reforms, regaining all its hit points and appearing in the same place, in the place the gemstone once occupied or the nearest unoccupied space. It doesn't need air, food, drink, or sleep. For that, it has a multi-attack, telekinetic rend, deals some force damage. We have Inhabit Object. It pours its psychic energy into a medium or smaller non-sentient object within 30 feet of it. It uses the shard's AC, and any damage dealt to the object applies to the shard's hit points. Dispel an evil and good can remove it. And while inhabited, the object becomes a magic item if it wasn't already, and a tiny cracked gemstone matching the kind of dragon the shard was in life appears somewhere on the object. If a creature wears or carries the inhabited object, they get the following benefits. Each of the creature's attacks deal an extra d8 force damage, and it gains resistance to psychic damage. It also has Psychic Crush, which recharges on a 5 to 6. Each creature of the shard's choice in a 60-foot radius centered on it must make a DC 20 intelligence saving throw. On a failure, they take 10d10 psychic damage and are stunned. We have a little bit of psionic spellcasting there, and then some legendary actions for the Rend ability. Cast a spell for 2 or commanding thoughts for 2. It targets a creature within 30 feet. The target must make a DC 20 wisdom saving throw or be charmed until the end of the next turn. While under the shard's control, it can only take the attack action or the dash action. Then we have a Dragon Blood Ooze. Nice to see some little more love for the Ooze category here. Typical Ooze-like resistances: Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, Poison. Well, this goes a little above and beyond because of the association with dragons. As well as, excuse me, typical Ooze condition immunities. It has Amorphous for squeezing through 1-inch spaces, a Spider Climb for climbing walls, pretty standard Ooze stuff. A Pseudopod attack that does bludgeoning damage plus 46 acid damage. The target is grappled by that if they're large or smaller. And then it also has a Slime Breath, which shoots out in a 30-foot cone. The creatures make a dex save or take 4d10 acid damage and are pulled up to 30 feet towards the Ooze. That's kind of a terrifying breath weapon, just shooting out Ooze that can then pull you inwards. That's pretty nasty. All right, then we have a Dragonbone Golem. So that one, the name kind of says it. It's a golem, but instead of being forged from flesh or steel or what have you, it's formed from dragon bones. All right, so this is considered a construct. Challenge rating 11. Immunity to poison. A couple conditions that, again, constructs typically have. It generates a fear aura within 20 feet of it. Creatures must make a wisdom saving throw or be incapacitated. On a failure, unless the golem is incapacitated. On a failure, they are frightened of it, and then they can be immune for 24 hours. Magic resistance, again, unusual nature for air, food, drink, or sleep. It can make 1 pinion attack or 2 rend attacks. If the pinion attack is made against a medium or smaller creature, they are restrained. If the golem has 2 pinions, each one can restrain 1 target. We have the Rend ability, which is piercing and necrotic damage, and then Petrifying Breath for 5 to 6. 60-foot cone of petrifying gas. Each creature must make a con save or take 10d6 poison damage and be restrained. The restrained target must repeat the saving throw at the end of its next turn. On a success, the effect ends on the target. On a failure, the target is petrified. So much, actually more expedient than some other petrification abilities. Next, we roll into the Dragonborn Champions. And they are essentially, as you can see from the imagery here, sort of a pinnacle Dragonborn champion. We have one for Bahamut, Sardior being the ruby head of the gem dragons, and then Tiamat. So not too much here. These are more NPCs than actual monsters. But for the Dragonborn of Bahamut, it's challenge rating 8. Immunity to Frightened, legendary resistance, has a long sword. Can make 3 attacks with it, which does, reasonable damage, but also does extra radiant damage, which it can cause to flare with bright light. If it does, the target must make a Constitution saving throw or be blinded until the start of the Dragonborn's next turn. It can only use this flare once per turn. That could actually be a really interesting magic item to give out to a player in some way. We have Healing Touch once per day. The target magically regains 40 hit points, and all diseases and poisons affecting the target are removed. So it's kind of like a souped up lay on hands, but you can't dole it out. It's kind of a one-shot deal. And then Radiant Breath Weapon, 30-foot cone for 8d10 radiant damage. Whenever it uses it, it can choose up to 3 creatures within the cone. Those creatures take no damage and instead gain half of that, so 4d10 hit points each. We have the Sardior one, which for some reason is challenge rating 6. I would have thought they would have tried to make them all the same challenge rating. And it looks like they all can fly. Okay, this one, the Sardior one kind of looks like a Psionics. So it does add their intelligence modifier to their AC. And they have Mind Blades, which do basically a dagger, but it also does psychic damage. It has Heat Breath. Okay, so 30-foot cone. Does 68 fire damage. Metal objects in that area glow red hot until the end of the Dragonborn's next turn. Any creature in physical contact with the heated object at the start of its turn must make a con save. On a failure, it takes 2d8 fire damage and at disadvantage on attack rolls until the start of its next turn. So it's kind of almost like heat metal, but in a breath weapon. And then has some limited psionics in Big B's hand, hypnotic pattern, and telekinesis. And the Dragonborn of Tiamat is a challenge rating 7. Legendary resistance, has a great axe that does some extra necrotic damage, and then necrotic breath in a 30-foot cone. Creature must make a wisdom saving throw or take 8d8 necrotic damage and be frightened of it for 1 minute. On a successful save, it isn't frightened, and it can repeat that saving throw at the end of each of its turns. Next up is a Dragon Flesh Grafter. Now, this is something that I also kind of wish we had more of, like, so the concept of grafting is something I'm sure you're familiar with, or at least have the general consensus to understand what it is. But basically, it is where you take bits from some creature of some kind, usually something of unique magical nature or magical properties, and graft it, attach it to yourself in a means to give yourself some extra abilities, right? So the thought process would be like you would take bits of a dragon and then attach it or replace it. And I remember the 3.5 Draconomicon had this in very much high detail. Like you could replace your eyes with dragon eyes, and now you have access to the dragon's senses and things of that nature, right? We see this in the form of monsters, but I would have liked to have seen, I guess, maybe grafting is a little too body horror-ish for 5th edition. I don't know. But I think it would be a cool extra, like, additional way to do, unique abilities. My only problem with it is I do see if they were to do this, they'll more than likely tie it to the magic item attunement system that we have in 5th edition. So, like, yeah, you could have dragon eyeballs, but you'd have to attune to them, which I see them doing that in the purposes of just balance, but at the same time, why do you have to attune to your own eyes? You know what I mean? I don't know. Anyway, Dragonflesh Grafters practice the forbidden rituals and risky experiments on themselves, modifying their body and minds to emulate the dragons that they revere. So we can see here is the Grafter, which basically looks orc, or something, that has sort of, we see draconic feet here as well as a draconic arm. Let's see, it makes a one claw and one great club attack. I guess this one happened to be done with, it does extra poison damage on its claws. Great club is unchanged, and it has acid retch. It retches forth a spray of acidic bile in a 30-foot cone. Creatures must make a dex save or take 4d6 acid damage. So I don't, like, this could have just been a standalone creature. To me, nothing here really speaks as though it's tied to being draconic. Like, it spits out acid, its claws do poison damage. I think this would have been a good opportunity to do one of those things where they're like, okay, based on the type of dragon bits that you graft, this could do fire damage, cold damage, what have you. And we have a Dragon Flesh Abomination, which we can kind of see here. You can see, I guess, the differentiating factors. You can kind of see the hair on it, right? So it's the final stage of a grafter's transformation, a hulking monster whose corrupted brain is ablaze with a desire for treasure. Again, this has gone from large to huge size. We've now gained some condition immunities. We have Cloying Miasma. The Abomination is surrounded by a noxious stench. At the start of its turn, any creature within 5 feet must make a con save or be poisoned until the start of its next turn. It gets 10 hit points at the start of each of its turns. It has multi-attack, 3 claws, acid spit, or any combination. The claws continue to do poison damage. The tail does a strength saving throw or knocked prone. It now has acidic spit, which is just an acid-based ranged attack, and then still has the acid belch, but the damage has increased to 8d6 acid damage from 4d6. So again, it seems, to me, I think there could have been an opportunity here for this to possibly be something like a template or something, because why does it turn you into a green dragon or something like that? Why couldn't this be red or white? Or even if it's a like an evil creature who decided to graft a metallic dragon to it, that could be also really interesting. All right, and then we have dragon followers. Again, these are basically NPCs, right? So we have the Dragon Blessed. This is listed as an acolyte of the dragon who they revere as gods. So nothing too crazy here. We have a mace that does some extra radiant damage, a sizable amount, 48 extra radiant. We have a Radiant Bolt that does radiant damage, and the Blessed regains 5 hit points. Or sorry, D10 hit points. That's kind of cool. And then we have a little bit of cleric-y based magics here. Light and Thaumaturgy at will, Enhance ability, Flame Strike, Mass Cure Wounds, Revivify, and Tongues. This could actually make a very interesting NPC if you wanted to have your party either hire out the services of someone or gain the services for the course of some sort of draconic based thing that they're doing of like a healer, but not like a full-blown cleric, like she's been blessed by the dragons, or they've been blessed by the dragons, what have you, and they have a little bit of capabilities, a little more than your average person, right? They are challenge rating 5, but they're not overly, you can't be like, okay, well, they have all these cleric abilities. No, they have some spells once per day in some of these instances, but they also have some offensive capability too. So I actually really like this this NPC quite a bit. It doesn't actually have to be dragon blessed either. You could obviously tweak or change that to suit whatever game you're running or the scenario you need. But this is a good, like, either hireling or perhaps like a higher, when the party's lower level, potentially like a Sherpa style person to kind of guide them through an area. I like that. Then we have the Dragon Chosen. This is the sort of the warrior version, if you will. They both have immunity to frighten so far. This one is, again, more of a melee fighter, a hand axe and a short sword. It has this unique ability called Hit or Miss. The hand axe magically returns to the chosen hands immediately after a ranged attack. So you can see there's obviously a hand axe, so you can hit with it in melee, but you can also throw it, and it automatically returns. Then we have a short sword that just does piercing damage. Then we have Biting Rebuke. Immediately after the chosen takes damage from a creature within 5 feet of it, it can use its reaction to make a short sword attack with advantage against the creature. Again, could also be something like that. Also could make a very potent enemy. Reminder that these are dragon chosen. They don't have to be good characters. This could be an evil character. And realistically, an evil character that can every turn as a reaction make an attack at advantage against a party member that hits him, that could definitely turn the tide of a battle for sure. And then we have a Dragon Speaker. This is sort of your utility bard style person. Again, this one's immune to Charm as well. Can make 2 Thunderbolt attacks, which are... I really love this concept that they started adding into the new Fizban's Plus style monsters, where they have an ability that can be both melee or ranged. And I do wonder if some aspect of that will come to us in the form of the D&D playtest. But Thunderbolt is either a melee or ranged spell attack. It does 3d8 thunder damage, and the target is pushed horizontally up to 10 feet away. Note that this does not have a limitation on the size, and there's no saving throw associated with the push from this. It also has some spellcasting, Dancing Lights, Calm Emotion, Charm Person, Command, Comprehend Languages, and then as a reaction it has Disarming Words. When a creature the speaker can see within 60 feet makes a damage roll, the speaker can roll a d6 and subtract it from that damage roll. Next up is a Dragonelle. I was very excited to see these come back. They are essentially a creature that is... I think they looked... I might be mixing them up with some other dragon-type creature from my memory in 3.5, but they were... I know Paladins in 3.5, because Mount was a class feature, not a spell. They could do... Like, there was a thing you could do with an alternative class feature to get a Dragonelle mount, which is pretty cool. So it says they're distantly related to Chromatic, Gem, and Metallic Dragons and resemble them in their basic form. As you can see here, they are more intelligent than your standard creatures. They look pretty awesome as well. Intelligence of 8, so that's basic. That's like the lowest a human typically could have. Obviously, if you're rolling stats, you can go lower, but if you're doing point buy or standard array, the lowest ability score you can have is an 8. They also fully understand Draconic and Common, but they cannot speak it. They have a fly speed. They have flyby, which is just makes them tiers above anything else, because not only do they have flyby, allowing you to get in and get out without provoking attacks of opportunity, they're also significantly stronger and hardier than most other creatures that have flyby. Looking at you, owls. They do have multi-attack, 2 rend attacks, and they also do 2d6 plus 3 slashing damage. So if you look at this in the grand scheme of other creatures that sort of fall in the realm of this, this is kind of like... it's almost, I think it's kind of on power level with something like a polar bear, to be honest with you. Let's go ahead and take a quick look. So we'll pull up a polar bear, and we'll do a comparison, because I think polar bears are also challenge rating 2. Yes, polar bears have a little less armor, a little less hit points, more movement speed in general, and a swim speed. Obviously, they're less intelligent. They do have keen smell, polar bears, and then they have 2 attacks, a d8 plus 5 and 2d6 plus 5. These guys have 2d6 plus 3, but they also have flyby. And then it does say here, right, with the DM's permission, a paladin can summon a spirit in the form of a Dragonelle using the Find Greater Steed spell, which appears in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. I would fully allow that in my campaign. If you're taking the time to go that deep, what is that, 13 plus levels into Paladin, to be able to get access to the Find Greater Steed spell, you can summon a Dragonelle and be that awesome dragon riding Paladin in my game. 100%. Next up is Dragon Turtles. Now, reminder, we do have the Dragon Turtle that does appear in the Monster Manual. That is the typical adult version of a Dragon Turtle. So we have here an Ancient Dragon Turtle, so which will have a little bit more than our buddy from the Monster Manual. So it has Mythic Actions, we can see here, right? It goes down to 350 hit points, recharges its Steam Breath, and then it can use the Mythic Action. So a lot of this is relatively the same. It doesn't need food or drink, this particular one. Its Bite Attack does extra lightning damage. Claws has the Tail Attack with the ability to knock prone. Its Steam Breath is a 90-foot cone now and does 15d8 fire damage. Legendary actions are Attack, Move, and Boiling Aura. Until the start of its next turn, whenever a creature starts its turn within 20 feet of the dragon, it takes 98 fire damage. Being underwater does not grant resistance to this damage. Sorry, it doesn't get to make a con save to take no damage. Then Mythic Actions, it can make a Bite Attack or Aura of Storms for 2. Lightning temporarily surrounds the Dragon Turtle, and it gains 40 temporary hit points until the start of its next turn. Until all these temporary hit points are gone, any creature that touches the Dragon Turtle or hits it with a melee attack takes 4d12 lightning damage, which is pretty solid. All right, so moving on, we have Egg Hunters. Parasites that seek out dragon eggs to feed on the contents. These kind of just, you can see them here, kind of little, almost like bug-like creatures. Look at this, kind of up underneath the egg, and kind of looks like maybe tendrils of some kind. So we have a hatchling version here. Not too much to talk about with this guy. They can breathe water and air, which I guess does make sense, as and they can burrow, right? Some dragons can burrow, some dragons can go underwater. And it has its Egg Tooth ability here, which does piercing damage. Or more piercing damage if the target is an object, i.e. the egg. And then it has a dash or disengage as a bonus action. And then when it becomes an adult, as that's kind of what we're seeing here, immunity to frighten and poison. It's still amphibious. If it removes motionless, it has advantage on its initiative roll. Moreover, if a creature hasn't observed an egg hunter move or act, must make an investigation check to discern that it is animate. Dragons have disadvantage on this check. That's a pretty interesting way to handle how it works and kind of dealing with its natural predators. They can make 2 barbed proboscis attacks, which I assume that's what those are, which have 5-foot reach, do a d6 plus 5 piercing, some necrotic damage, and it regains hit points equal to the necrotic damage dealt. And then Torpor Spores, recharge on a 5/6. It releases a billow of sparkling blue spores. Each creature in a 30-foot radius must make a con save or be poisoned for a minute. While poisoned in this way, the creature can take either an action or a bonus action, but not both. It can't take reactions. The creature can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on a success. If a creature's saving throw is successful, it's not effective for 24 hours. And then, as a reaction, when it takes damage, it gives itself resistance to that damage. One of my favorite creatures, the Elder Brain Dragon. Again, I've talked about these in the past, kind of when it was first announced, but if you could imagine something as terrifying as encountering an Elder Brain, the leader of a colony of mind flayers. Typically, the biggest benefit to you is that they're in a big brine tank, and they're pretty much immobile, and if you don't get close enough to the tentacles, you're good. Well, how about we take that and attach it to the back of a freaking dragon, and now you have a mobile dragon-based Elder Brain. Absolutely terrifying. So let's go ahead and scroll down. So you can see the art. It's slimy and gross and disgusting, and I love it. It turns to an aberration as part of this, gets immunity to psychic damage, Charmed, Frightened, has Blind Sight. 4 legendary resistances, does double damage to objects and structures. Can make a bite attack, claw attack, and a tentacle attack. Its bite attacks are enhanced with psychic damage. It has 15-foot long tentacles that do psychic damage and then grapple. You can grapple up to 4 targets at a time. It has Tadpole Brine Breath, which is just absolutely terrifying. 120-foot line, 15 feet wide. Now, normally a lot of line attacks are 5 feet. This is 15 feet. So this is actually a pretty sizable area you're able to hit with this. You have to make a DC 22 con save or take 10d10 psychic damage on a failure, half on a success. On a success or failure, if a creature isn't a construct or undead, it becomes infested with illithid tadpoles. Did you read that? On a success or failure. Regardless of if you succeed that con save, you are infested with illithid tadpoles. While infested, you take 3d10 psychic damage at the start of each of your turns. You can repeat that save at the end of your turns, ending it if you succeed on 3 saves in that time period. If the creature is targeted by magic that ends a curse or restores 40 hit points or more, the tadpoles are instantly killed. If a humanoid is reduced to 0 hit points while infested, it is stable but remains unconscious for 12 hours. When the period of unconsciousness ends, that creature transforms into a Mind Flayer, nothing short of a wish cast on the unconscious creature. It says, casting a wish on the unconscious creature rids it of the infestation and prevents it from turning, but once the turn is complete, you're done. You are now Mind Flayer forever. It also has 3 legendary actions, 1 for a tentacle attack and 2 for shatter concentration. Targets a creature concentrating on a spell or an ability, and they take 3d12 psychic damage. It also ends the concentration regardless. So they end the concentration and take the psychic damage. Next up is the Emerald Dragon. I do like the Emerald Dragon. I think it's very interesting how most of the gem dragons have kind of this chunky, rock-like design to them, yet they went for a very slender, almost snake serpent-like design for the Emerald Dragon. So let's go ahead and take a look at our Ancient Emerald Dragon here. Resistance to fire and psychic, 3 legendary resistances. This one can tunnel and does leave a tunnel behind it. It has Warp Perception once per day. It can cast Mirage Arcane, requiring no spell components and using Intelligence as its spellcasting ability. A bite attack that's augmented with psychic damage, claw attack. Disorienting Breath is its breath weapon. 90-foot cone, intelligence saving throw, which takes 16d6 psychic damage, and when the creature makes an attack roll or ability check, it must roll a d8 and reduce the number by that number rolled on that d8. On a success, it takes half damage and doesn't roll the additional effect. Sorry, my phone's going off over here. We have Psionics, Mage Hand, Minor Illusion, Detects Thoughts, Dispel Magic, Etherealness, Major Image, and Mislead. It can change shape. It has Psychic Step, and its legendary actions, the unique one for it is Emerald Embers for 3. It creates a dancing mode of green flame around a creature it can see within 60 feet of it. They must make a dexterity saving throw or take 12d6 fire damage. Next up is an Eye Drake. It says when a beholder contends with a dragon for power and wealth, its thought of its dragon's rival can become deeply obsessive, eventually pervading the beholder's dreams. For those of you unaware how beholders work, when beholders dream of things and they actually sleep, their unconscious thoughts can bring things into existence. That's usually how other beholders are made. A beholder dreams of a beholder, and then it makes a new one. It says if this rivalry lasts long enough, these fever dreams can manifest as an Eye Drake, a beholder-like creature with draconic features, as you can see right here. So this is also an aberration, immunity to prone, unusual nature. Has a bite attack, but it has its breath weapon is actually anti-magic, right? So it emits a 30-foot cone. Every creature in that area makes a con save or takes 6d12 force damage. Every spell of 3rd level or lower on creatures and objects within that area ends. It also can shoot eye rays. You can see the eyes are actually at the tips of the wings. It shoots 3 eye rays at random. We have a freezing ray, constitution save or cold damage, and have your speed halved. Debilitating ray, thunder damage, and incapacitation. A repulsion ray, force damage, and knocked back up to 60 feet, which is a pretty sizable push. Fire ray is fire damage, just that's it. Paralyzing ray is paralysis for a minute, repeating the saving throw at the end of each turn. And the Death Ray is 8d6 necrotic damage, and it dies if it's dropped to 0 hit points. Then we have the Gem Great Worm. Again, we saw the Chromatic Great Worm. This is a similar concept just for Gem Dragons. So again, challenge rating 26. Has immunity to the various types of damage depending on which dragon it is based on. All right, Gem Awakening, and again, its Mythic Action goes to 0, goes to 400 instead. Instead, gets its Breath Weapon back and its Legendary Resistances, of which it has 4. Bite Attack does extra force damage. Claw attacks also do a grapple and restrain. Its Breath Weapon is a 300-foot cone, which is just absolutely massive. I don't know if you've ever Like, you'll need a big battle mat to map out what a 300-foot cone looks like. But it's basically, like, that's like towns almost in the size of it, depending on where you're at. On a failed save, you take 11d12 force damage and are knocked prone. On a success, you take half and aren't knocked prone. On a success or failure, its speed becomes 0. Mass Telekinesis recharges after a short, long rest. It targets any number of creatures or objects it can see within 120 feet. No target can weigh more than 4,000 pounds, and objects can't be targeted if they're worn or carried. Each targeted creature must succeed on a strength saving throw or be restrained in telekinetic grip. At the end of a creature's turn, it can repeat the saving throw. At the end of the Great Worm's turn, it can move each creature or object in its telekinetic grip up to 60 feet in any direction, but not beyond 120 feet of itself. In addition, it can choose any number of creatures restrained in this way to deal 7d12 force damage to them. We also have Psionics, Dispel Magic, Force Cage, Plane Shift, Reverse Gravity, and Time Stop. Change Shape and Psychic Step remain. Same thing with the legendary actions, but our unique one is Psychic Beam for 3 actions. A 90-foot line, 10-foot wide. Creatures make an intelligence saving throw or take 5d10 psychic damage. Next up here is a Gem Stalker. This is when a Gem Dragon kills an aberrant creature from the Far Realm. The dragon sometimes reshapes the alien corpse into a Gem Stalker, a cunning predator capable of traversing the Underdark, hunting aberrations, and guarding its creator's lair. A Gem Stalker is imbued with life, sapience, and purpose by the mystical energies of the Gem Dragon's breath and is dedicated to its mission. So these are typically neutral creatures, but they are basically designed by Gem Dragons to just go seek out and destroy aberrations. Which, for the most part, sounds like a good thing, but I also think it could be an interesting plot device if someone's playing like a, Aberrant Mind or Aberrant Soul Sorcerer, where they kind of have powers derived from the Far Realm in some way. That could be a very interesting thing, where basically that character is attacked by a Gem Stalker, and then the party actually has to traverse to find the Gem Dragon doing it, to let them know, like, whoa, hey, no, our buddies just got funky powers. They're not evil, though. Don't kill them. Stop sending Gem Stalkers after them. As resistance to psychic damage, it has Spider Climb, Unusual Nature. 4 claw attacks. A bonus action, it can do a Crystal Dart, which is a range attack, D10 force plus 1 of the following, depending on the type of dragon. So if it's Amethyst, it can teleport up to 30 feet. If it's Crystal, it gets temporary hit points equal to the damage dealt. If it's Emerald, the target must roll a d4 and subtract it from attack roll it makes before the start of the Gemstalker's next turn. Sapphire, you make a strength saving throw or be pushed 10 feet away and knocked prone. And Topaz is a con save or be poisoned. And then the reaction is Protective Link. When another creature the Gem Stalker can see within 300 feet is about to take damage, it reduces that damage by 3d6. It then takes the damage equal to that amount. We have a Ghost Dragon. Now, we have kind of seen Ghost Dragons before. It originally appeared in Candlekeep. But either way, we have Dragon's attachment to a horde can be strong enough to bind the dragon's spirit to existence after death. Such a Ghost Dragon haunts the horde, often forming an attachment to a single priceless object that becomes the focus of the Ghost Dragon's undead existence. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an evil dragon either, right? In my mind, I would think a Ghost Dragon, like something was clung so hard to the world of the living and its treasure that it would want to say that sounds evil to me, but it doesn't have to be. This could also, again, be another great plot device if somebody picks up an object from, if they find somewhere. It turns out the Ghost Dragon horde, maybe not its incorporeal body, but perhaps its sentience is tied to the item, and then like it's a quest to bring that back to its horde, unfinished business kind of a thing. Again, resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, immunity to acid, cold, necrotic, poison. Most condition immunities, as it is a ghost. Incorporeal movement, 3 legendary resistances. Its bite attack does cold damage, and the target's speed is halved. A claw attack that does necrotic damage, and a terrifying breath. 90-foot cone, con save or take 98 cold damage, and the target is frightened of the Ghost Dragon for a minute. On success, it isn't frightened. While frightened, it is also paralyzed. The frightened creature can repeat the save at the end of each of its turn. And then again, succeeding makes you immune. That's pretty cool, and I love the art of this, because this actually happens to be, I believe... Is that a chromatic dragon? It might be a red dragon. But either way, I really like the concept of this. All right, a Horde Mimic. Akin to the common Mimic described in a monster manual, Horde Mimics are among the oldest and most cunning of their kind. A Horde Mimic's massive amorphous form and shapeshifting prowess allow it to take on the semblance of a vast trove of treasures, not just a single object. Like smaller mimics, Horde Mimics exude adhesive goo to trap prey. They can also vent a fine caustic mist from their pores that burns and blinds creatures caught in it. Horde Mimics are so named because many enter into partnerships with dragons, each one serving as a false horde in a dragon's lair to draw unwitting intruders away from the real riches. So we can see, here's one here. The art, again, fantastic for this. It's interesting to see that that a Horde Mimic is essentially, I mean, it is intelligent, right? And it can talk. You see this common, draconic, and telepathy out to 120 feet. So a Horde Mimic actually has the capability to speak, because it says, if faced with the unexpectedly fierce opposition, though, a Horde Mimic might offer information about the true Horde in exchange for its life. So I like the kind of symbiotic relationship it has with dragons. Typically, like, I'll hire you to basically be here to, dissuade intruders, but it's also a thinking creature. So if you're like, I'm going to mess up this mimic and going to kill it, the mimic might be like, hold up. All right, this is just me. All you see here is me. I'm going to let you go. The real horde down the hole to the left. All right, false appearance. Again, that's a mimic thing, right? To make it look like something that it's not. Pseudopod attacks do piercing and acid damage. Or that's a bite, sorry. The pseudopods do bludgeoning, and it adheres to the target. It grapples them. While grappled, you are also restrained, and you have disadvantage on checks made to escape said grapple. The caustic mist recharges on a 5 to 6. It sprays mist in a 30-foot cone. Dexterity saving throw or take 68 acid damage and be blinded until the end of your next turn. Success, you take half damage and aren't blinded. And then Shape Changer. It transforms into a horde or back into its true amorphous form. And that's just basically, again, any equipment it is wearing or carrying isn't transformed. It reverts to its true form if it dies. Similarly to interesting things we can throw around in a horde, we also have Horde Scarabs. Beetle-like creatures that, through some feat of natural adaptation or alchemy ingenuity, blend in perfectly among piles of gold coins. They feed on tiny mites that infest the dragon's scales and lair, and their painful bite can be a strong deterrent to would-be treasure thieves. Another symbiotic creature living in harmony with the dragons. So challenge rating 1/8. They do also have Tremor Sense. Again, they have false appearance. They have a bite attack. If it's a creature, the creature has disadvantage on attack rolls until the start of its next turn. And then Scale Dust as a bonus action. Each creature within 5 feet of the scarab must make a dex save or be outlined in blue light for 10 minutes. When outlined, a creature sheds light, can't become invisible. In addition, every dragon within 1 mile of the creature becomes aware of it and can unerringly track the creature. Casting Dispel Magic ends this effect. That is terrifying. That all dragons are alerted to your presence, meaning that you're most likely attempting to steal treasure from a dragon, and they can unerringly track you. So it's almost kind of like an interesting Fairy Fire-esque aspect with the constant tracking. And then there is a Swarm version of it here, providing swarm resistances and immunities, as well as an increased damage in the bite and the general swarm mechanics. Next up is a Hollow Dragon, which I also very much like. It says, unlike dragons who explore the magic of undeath for power, some metallic dragons seek undeath as a means to pursue a noble purpose. For the sake of protecting an artifact or fulfilling an oath, a dragon might transform into a hollow dragon, accepting undeath until the purpose is fulfilled. As the name suggests, a hollow dragon is the husk of a metallic dragon's hide, filled with radiant energy. Depending on the original dragon's kind, the energy might take the appearance of flame, lightning, or so on. So it makes it sound like this is sort of the good lich version of like a Draco Lich. And we saw the Ghost Dragon, and there's nothing that said a Ghost Dragon, like I said, it couldn't be a metallic dragon either, but it sounds like they're trying to say this. Or at least if they're trying to persist for the purposes of a noble cause, they would become a Hollow Dragon, which is still considered an undead, is resistant to necrotic, immune to poison radiant, as well as several conditions. 3 legendary resistances. It also has this reconstruction ability. When it's reduced to 0 hit points, its body breaks into 9 pieces. 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 wings, a tail, a torso, and a head. Each piece is a large object with an AC of 19 and 27 hit points, and immunity to psychic and poison damage. After a d6 days, if all pieces are still within 6 miles, they teleport to the location of the headpiece, and then they basically rebuild themselves with full hit points. Multi-attack for 1 bite, 2 claws, or it can use Snapping Presence. Its bite does extra radiant damage. Snapping Presence is each creature of the Hollow Dragon's choice within 60 feet must make a Wisdom save. On a fail, the creature's speed is halved and has disadvantage on attack rolls until the end of its next turn. And it also has a Radiant Breath, 60-foot cone for 12d8 radiant damage. And then as far as legendary actions, we have 3. A Claw for 1, a Ghostly Binding for 2. It creates ethereal bindings around a creature it can see within 60 feet. The target must make a strength save or be restrained until the end of the dragon's next turn. Or Booming Scales for all 3 actions. Each creature within 10 feet of the hollow dragon must make a DC 19 con save or take 7d6 thunder damage, or half on a success. Next up, we have the last little bit here. We have the Lion Drake, which is a beautiful looking creature. A Lion Drake is a solitary and territorial predator with the long neck and wings of a brass dragon and the head and body of a lion. Sometimes known as Dragons, that's how I always pronounce it. This may be what I was actually remembering as a potential mount from earlier editions. But they are considered a monstrosity, not a dragon. Also, this art looks amazing. This one looks kind of doofy. I don't like the neck. It just looks weird to me. I very much like this one. I mean, perhaps it's just the mane. Maybe this is the difference between, like, I guess maybe like a female versus a male, the mane. But I think just in the art, the mane kind of filling out the space behind the neck makes it look a lot more, looks cooler and more intimidating, where this just kind of looks like you stretched a dragon and stuck a cat face on it. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Multi-attack, 1 bite attack, 1 claw attack, does piercing damage, and then I can knock the creature prone, similar to most lions. Claw attack, a blood-chilling roar ability. It lets out a terrifying roar, out audible out to 300 feet. Any creature within 30 feet of the Lion Drake must make a wisdom saving throw or be frightened for 1 minute. A creature that fails it by 5 or more is paralyzed for the same duration, and they can repeat the saving throw at the end of its turns. So, I mean, it's not... I thought it was going to be a lot cooler. I think I like the Dragonelle a lot better. I mean, it's cool. It's like a souped-up lion with wings. It is a little bit... It's a challenge rating 7, so it's a little kind of above and beyond the capabilities of being like a mount creature. But it could have been if it was a little bit on, like, scaled down on the weaker side. And I almost would prefer that. Because this feels a weird, like, who is the target, like, enemy of this? Again, it could be evil if you want it to be... They are, more intelligent. They have 6 intelligence, and they can speak Draconic. I don't know. I just don't, like I said, I don't love this art, and I'm not entirely sure. Like, it feels like it could do more cool things. All right, next up is the Metallic Great Worm. Again, similar to the other 2 we've covered thus far. All right, so again, this one happens to be a challenge rating 28, so a little bit higher, I think, than the other 2. Immunity to the damage type of the associated dragon, as well as charmed, frightened, and poisoned conditions. 4 legendary resistances. We have Metallic Awakening, the sort of mythic action that it can do. We've seen that before. The bite damage does extra force damage. The claw does a grapple and a restrain. The tail does potential to knock prone. It does have multiple breath weapons. We have Elemental Breath, a 300-foot cone. Dexterity saving throw or take 13d12 damage of a type associated with the dragon, whether that be acid, cold, fire, or lightning. We also have Sapping Breath, a 300-foot cone for a con save. On a failure, the creature falls unconscious for 1 minute. On a successful save, it has disadvantage on attack rolls and saving throws until the end of the Great Worm's next turn. An unconscious creature can repeat the save at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on a success. Change shape. And then legendary actions, we have an attack or a wing attack. Pretty standard stuff, right? The knockback as well as the movement. And then for a mythic action, it has bite and shattering roar for 2 actions. Each creature in a 120-foot radius sphere centered on the Great Worm must make a Constitution saving throw or take 3d12 thunder damage and be incapacitated until the end of its next turn. Then we have Metallic Sentinels, is a guardian created by a metallic dragon, forged from the metal associated with its creator, and powered by the energy of the dragon's breath weapon. I also really like this concept. It seems like I like the concept that they all have something they can use their breath weapon to manifest, right? The Chromatic Dragons had the animated breath, which is basically just an elemental created from their breath. We have the Gem Stalkers created by the Gem Dragons' breath weapons, which again are things sought to seek out aberrations. Again, it kind of makes sense with the psionic capability of the Gem Dragons to do that. And then the Metallic Dragons can make these sort of golems, constructs to basically do with what they will. So we have 2 options. We have the Metallic Peacekeeper here. Again, a construct, immunity to fire, and then several conditions. Immutable form, that's a standard thing for constructs or golems. Telepathic bond, while the Peacekeeper is on the same plane of existence as its master, it can magically convey what it senses to its master. and they can commute at will. Makes 2 slam attacks for 3d8 plus 3 bludgeoning, and has a calming mist. It releases a calming mist in a 30-foot radius centered on itself. The creatures in that area must make a charisma saving throw or become charmed by the Peacekeeper for a minute. While charmed, the creature is incapacitated and has a speed of 0. And then we have the Metallic Warbler, which looks like it's like a songbird of some kind, right? So immunity to fire in the same conditions, immutable form, telepathic bond, a much lesser damage claw attack, and again the calming mist as well, but to a lesser saving throw. It says they resemble songbirds and serve as clandestine agents of their creators, keeping watch over the communities without directly intervening. So it sounds like you might put a metallic peacekeeper near your horde or somewhere where you need it. Here's the little warbler right here, and this would be something maybe like a spy, perhaps. Then lastly, we have one of our, actually I was going to say last, but there's a couple more. We have the Moonstone Dragons, another new dragon introduced here. It says, ancient legends suggest that when the gods came to the first world and tried to populate it with their humanoid followers, a clever dragon fled to the Feywild to hide a clutch of eggs. The magic of that fairy realm suffused the eggs, which hatched into the first Moonstone Dragons. Their descendants are now found throughout the Feywild. So you can see it kind of has almost like a mithril dragon, again, from older editions, kind of other metallic dragon design, except it has all of this green sort of hair on the tip of the tail, along the tail length, on the chin here. So, it is still considered a dragon, even though it spends all its time pretty much in the Feywild. It's immune to charm. Has legendary resistances, 3 of those. A bite attack that does extra radiant damage. A claw attack, a tail attack that can knock prone. And then 2 breath weapons that recharge on a 5/6. The Dream Breath, which is a 90-foot cone. And the creature must make a con save or go unconscious for 10 minutes. It only ends if it takes damage or someone uses an action to wake it up. Or Moonlight Breath, a 120-foot line that's 10 feet wide. The target must make a dex save or take 11 d10 radiant damage. It also has some spellcasting, Fairy Fire, Calm Emotions, Dispel Magic, Invisibility, and Revivify. And then again, its legendary actions can be for a tail attack or to cast a spell. Following that, we have the Sapphire Dragons, which we have seen before here, especially in the minis and for the 50th or the 45th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons. So here you can see this is that same art here. Again, we're going to have resistance to lightning and thunder damage, immunity to the frightened condition. We have Spider Climb, the ability, and then also Tunneler, 3 legendary resistances. Its multi-attack, its bite attack does thunder damage. Claw, and then we have Debilitating Breath in a 90-foot cone. Must make a con save or take 10d10 thunder damage and be incapacitated until the end of its next turn. Limited psionic spellcasting and Dissonant Whispers, Hold Monster, Meld into Stone, Telekinesis, and Teleport. It also has Change Shape and Psychic Step. And then its legendary actions, it has 3. And the unique ability here is Telekinetic Fling for 3. It chooses 1 medium or smaller object that isn't being worn or carried that's within 60 feet and magically hurls it at an object it can see within 60 feet. The target must make a dex save or take 12d6 bludgeoning damage. And then we have Sea Serpents, again, another kind of dragon. They rank alongside dragon turtles as some of the most feared predators of the deep and inspire many sellers' worst nightmares. So we can see the art is pretty solid for these guys. I very much like this art better. I feel like the perspective on the head of this particular piece of art, I don't particularly love that. I like the kind of more sleek look here. But either way, a challenge rating 14 creature. Amphibious, so it can breathe air and water. 2 legendary resistances, immunity to cold damage. Siege Monster makes sense if you're going to be fighting and dealing with ships. Siege Monster is a solid thing, doing double damage to objects and structures. I can make a bite attack and either 1 constrict or tail. Its bite does extra cold damage. Its constrict ability is a grapple and a restrain. The tail has the knock prone ability that we've seen, and it has Rime Breath. It exhales a 60-foot cone of cold. Creatures must make a con save or take 90-10 cold damage. And then its legendary actions, which it has 3. A tail attack for 1 or a bite attack for 2. We also have a young version of that goes down from a challenge rating of 14 to a challenge rating 8. And lastly in here we have the Topaz Dragons, which honestly in this art looks more metallic than gem in this particular piece of art. But I do like the shape of the face and the head. I like that a lot. And I like the way the spines are kind of straight up and down floating crystals. Here, this art, this looks just fantastic. But to me, it does look metallic, right? It looks like it's made out of gold. Like this looks like a cooler version of a gold dragon than the gold dragons that we have, personally. All right, so the Ancient Topaz Dragon, challenge rating 20. Resistance to cold and necrotic damage. This one is amphibious. It also has Fabricate once a day. You can cast Fabricate, requiring no spell components and using Intelligence as its modifier. 3 legendary resistances. Its bite attack is augmented with necrotic damage, interestingly enough. Claw attack, and then it has Desiccating Breath. It exhales a yellowish necrotic energy in a 90-foot cone. Make a con save or take 14d6 necrotic damage and are weakened until the end of their next turn. The weakened creature has disadvantage on strength-based ability checks and strength saving throws, as well as the creature's weapon attacks that rely on strength. Succeeding gives you half damage and none of those effects. Our psionic spells here we have Anti-Life Shell, Bane, Control Water, Create or Destroy Water, Change Shape and Psychic Step, and then for our unique legendary action we have Essential Reduction, costing 3. The target targets a creature or an object not being worn or carried within 60 feet. That target must make a Constitution saving throw or take 98 necrotic damage. If it reduces it to 0 hit points, it crumbles into dust. Honestly, for some of the abilities, I'm kind of flipping because I was originally a big fan. I like the design of the Amethyst Dragon. I also like the sleekness of the Emerald Dragon. But based on art alone, I think I got to give it to the Topaz Dragon, right? I think I just love the design of it. It does look like it should have been the Gold Dragon design, in my opinion. But there you go, folks. We've covered the entirety of Fizban's Treasury of Dragons new beasts here. I will have a link in the top of the video description as well as the pinned comment to my Amazon affiliate account if you'd like to pick up Fizban's if you don't have it already. And you pick it up via that link, I do get a small little kickback from it. As far as creatures, we'll go back to the table of contents and look at the ones let's just talk about real quick, the ones that I think are my favorites out of here. So, I liked the kind of breath creations of the various dragons. I think the animated breath weapon is probably the coolest one, just like design-wise. Although I do like the Gem Stalker, again, for the reason I mentioned of possibly having it accidentally attacking a member of the party. The Draco Hydra was okay. I don't even remember going over the Draconians. Did I do that? I skip right over them? I feel like I did. Did I skip right over the Draconians? Maybe I did. I think I skipped over all these guys. Huh. What do you know? Anyway, we'll come back to that, or it'll be fixed in editing after the fact. But yeah, I like the sort of symbiotic creatures that deal with the dragons, like the Horde Mimic, the Horde Scarabs. I like the concept of these dragons that want to stay beyond death, and the Ghost Dragon, the Hollow Dragon. I really like the Dragonelle, too, right? The concept of the cool, like, dragon mount that's not like a true dragon, but is a little bit, above and beyond. I think that that's pretty cool as well. So there you go, folks. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. I will see you all next time.